How far back can you really remember? You might be surprised when a single moment burns itself into your mind. This is one of mine. 2 boys, a tricycle, a doll's pram and a brown ambulance. The scene is number 50, Curl Street, Whiteinch, outside the close where I lived. My best pal Michael and I had a brilliant idea. We'd borrowed my older brother Charles' tricycle. Not one of the modern plastic toys, but a heavy steel 3-wheeler with spoked wheels and a chain between the back wheels with the little storage box. We also had my younger sister Rosemary's doll's pram plus a rope. The plan was simple. Tie the pram to the tricycle. I'd climb in. Michael would pedal. What could go wrong? Not what you'd think. No tumble from the pram. No broken arm, no split head. Fate doesn't play its game so predictably. This time it was a screw. A sharp little screw, part of the pram's frame, right where a doll's head would rest. At the first tug as Michael pedaled, I fell back against it and the screw drove into my back beside my spine. I was only 3, tears were allowed. But what fixed the memory wasn't the pain, it was the trip to hospital. I was carried out, wrapped in a blanket by one of the ambulance crew. Outside was not the usual blue ambulance with the white stripe along the body ending in the red St. Andrew's cross. Common on the Glasgow streets. This ambulance was brown with a white stripe along the side with a red cross at the end. It is burned into my mind as clearly as the screw itself. This was my first trip to York Hill Hospital for sick children, the day I got what felt like a season ticket for hospital visits. Years later, I asked my mother why there had been brown ambulances. She told me Glasgow had 2 fleets, St. Andrew's blue and white, and St. John's brown with a white stripe. The brown ones were fever ambulances, a hangover from the time before the NHS when diphtheria, scarlet fever, TB and others stalked the city. By the late 1950s, the worst had been beaten back, but the vehicles remained. Polio still had one last revival in the early 1960s. After that, until the pandemic of 2025, we thought the diseases had been defeated in Britain. That memory opened the door to others. My first home was a single-end, a one-room flat where the close met the bottom of the stair. Open the door and step inside. To your left, the close wall. To the right, the wall of a bed recess. Ahead, the window to the street with the sink beneath it. To the right of the sink, a black leaded fireplace with tiny ovens on either side. On the wall adjacent to the fireplace, Rosemary's cot. This wall ended in the recess holding the double bed my parents and I shared. A settee pulled across the front of the bed. Charles slept there. I think there were 2 armchairs, high on the wall as you entered the only door, the gas meter. That gas meter ties to a story my mother and her pal Betty used to laugh about. Betty's daughter Dorothy was bringing her first boyfriend round to meet Betty, and for some reason our house became the stage. A few cakes had been set out for the adults. We children had been drilled. If asked, "Do you want a cake?" the answer was to be no, thank you. Of course, when the plate came round, we all said yes. The cakes vanished. The adults sat in silent embarrassment, their perfect plan undone by hungry bairns. Then the gas ran out and nobody had a florin known as a 2-bob bit for the meter. After much scrambling, the new boyfriend broke the tension with one line. "Why don't you just file down a penny?" That's what I do. Not long after, I was sent to live with my grandfather at 41, Dunning Street, Ladybank, Parkhead. Looking back, I assume it was to ease the crowding in the single end. Whatever the reason, I'm glad I was. Because it allowed me precious time with my grandfather. Granddad had a 2-bedroom flat at the top of a 1930s tenement. The living room held a large bed where he slept. One bedroom was taken by Aggie the lodger? My gran had died in 1943 at the age of 39. I knew Aggie, as wee Aggie, or by my grandfather's other name for her, Shackly Arse. I don't ever remember speaking to her. She was gone to work before I woke, back after I was asleep. What I loved most was bath time, the bath itself and towels warmed by the fire wrapped round me after by my grandfather. The furniture in the living room probably from the 40s or 30s. What I remember most was the armchairs, each had one pull-out table that dropped across to the other arm of the chair, where I ate breakfast. The kitchen as I remember had what I later learned was a back-to-back stove, the oven heated from the living room fire. Above the living room fireplace hung 2 portraits from a photographer. On the left, me as a toddler, on the right, Charles who was named after my grandfather, McKenna. I was named after my grandfather, McAllister. That portrait of me I still have up in the loft. Unlike the image of Dorian Gray, it hasn't preserved me, I am old and worn. My memories include me looking at Charles' portrait and calling him shitty ass. My grandfather always laughed, but warned me not to let my mother hear. I called Aggie old shackly ass, same laugh, same warning, only Aggie this time. There's another memory from that time I didn't understand until years later. Glasgow still had pea soup fogs thick with sulphur and who knows what else. My dad would stand at the window, peering out into the nothingness, and say quietly, "I know somebody who is not going to have a good night." Only later did my mother explain he meant my granddad, who had lung disease from his years as a foundry labourer in a foundry in Parkhead. Those choking fogs left him struggling for breath. One day my visit to Grandad ended. My mother came to collect me. Grandad was subdued and quiet, promised he would visit soon, and he did. Later I learned why I was taken home. He was dying and no one wanted me to be the one to find him dead. Fast forward to a time after the move to 51, Curl Street. A larger house we took just before Christine was born in 1958. My last conversation with grandfather stayed with me. He said he had a set of watercolor paints and if he was still here at Christmas, he would give them to me. At the time, I didn't understand, why would he not be here? But he wasn't. He died in November 1959, aged just 56. My grandfather died, and so did Lilybank. My grandfather died, and so did Lilybank. A BBC documentary in the 70s shows Dunning Street rundown. That was reason enough for the cameras. Since then, it has been bulldozed and rebuilt. Modern houses stand there now. Dunning Street itself erased, gone from the map, just like Old Charlie, my dad's name for his father. Two stories from my father's childhood stick in my mind. One was in a single end, the body laid out for the wake. Some of the children, possibly early teens, mischievous as always, had tied a length of twine or thread from the corpse's hand up over the clothes pulley and down to the floor. Nobody noticed until the hand began to rise from the coffin. The effect was Charlie Chaplin on steroids, adults scattering in panic, cramming through the doorway to get out, tripping over each other like a slapstick escape scene. The other was at another wake and the carrying out. The coffin had to be taken down a winding tenement stair. The man at the front lost his footing and the whole thing shot forward. For a moment, the coffin was hurtling down the staircase on its own, heading straight for the close mouth. Panic, shouting, arms grabbing. But they missed it. Black humour afterwards. But in the moment, it must have been like something from a comedy film, only it was no act.